Today we're going to talk about 5 AWS services that have very similar names, the 5 CloudX. Let's go back to our office analogy. Remember, we imagined our EC2 instances as cubicles in a large office building, and the software we run at them can be seen as workers in the cubicle. When we need work done, we rent out as many as we need. We may need some cubicles just for a bit before we give the office space back to AWS to rent to someone else, or we might keep them continuously for years. If we have small bits of work that just need to be done by someone and we don't want to care about who does it and where they work, then we can utilize AWS Lambdas, which we imagine as busy interns buzzing around the office. Then we have our document storage facility S3, where we can store unlimited amounts of documents in buckets, and an internal phone system, or VPCs, which we can have private communication between all these components. Now, in a busy office, we absolutely need to keep an eye on who did what last week, what work is finished, what maybe couldn't be done and is still on hold, or which documents were put where and by whom. Otherwise, it would get chaotic pretty quickly. So, let's introduce the gang. They have different tasks and abilities, but their naming can be confusing at first, and I myself at least kept mixing them up a lot in the beginning. Let's start with Walter CloudWatch. Walter has his CloudWatch agents to help him. You can install an agent in your EC2 cubicle to monitor tasks, store work results, and log data. Similarly, Walter collects the log data from our Lambda interns as well if we ask him to. But not only that, Walter also keeps an eye on how much load is being put on the services, how they perform, and how much capacity is still left. With his agents, Walter's reports will be more detailed, but he can get the basics done just by himself. And because that's not enough, he also has his own alert system that can be finely tuned to notify you or directly react to things happening. This could be when bills start to pile up or something went wrong in general. Next in the bunch, we have CloudTrail. Terra also keeps an eye on your services and workloads, but she is focused on meticulously logging all calls that came in or went out. She's our go-to when ensuring compliance and auditing. By default, Terra is not active in our company, and we have to specifically ask her to include our company in her duties. Let's continue to Firmina CloudFormation. Firmina is really good at setting up infrastructure based on templates. Imagine we have our setup of lots of AWS services, or many people working in our company, the office analogy, and we want to get the exact same setup in another region because the company is expanding. In that case, we can write up templates, and Firmina CloudFormation will set all of this up for us whenever we want and however many times we need it. Firmina also detects drift. That means when things were being changed around and no longer conform to the blueprint. Other reasons why we might ask Firmina for help is when we have a setup to do our specific job and need redundancy, i.e. the same setup in another availability zone. The best part is that our blueprints are essentially just a list of all our services and settings. Firmina's services are also more broadly called infrastructure as code. Moving on to number 4, we have Frida CloudFront. Let's imagine a scenario where a company makes a product. It needs to be available worldwide, and we can afford to ship it from our headquarters every single time. That's where Frida CloudFront excels with her edge locations. She has data centers in pretty much every part of the world and will create what's called a cache of our product. This product could be a video like this one. And no matter if you're watching from central London or the Bermuda Triangle, you want it delivered in crisp 4K at the click of a button. All CloudFront needs to know is where our origin data is located, and she will start making copies and keep them up to date. Alright, and now to our last service for today, Cloud9. Cloud9 is more of a niche service, but nonetheless important to know about for the exam. We will leave the office analogy for a bit, and I will just tell you that Cloud9 is a virtual code environment that can be used to edit files and write code directly in a browser. This can be beneficial when working with other people in a remote setting, but if your Wi-Fi is bad, then the experience won't be great either. Okay, let's look at what the exam might ask about these services. Question 1. A company plans a global initiative and a number of videos on their website will be featured by international media outlets. Which service do you use to make sure the video will run smoothly, even under heavy load? Host the video on? A. Reserved EC2 instances. B. An S3 bucket with intelligent tiering. C. An S3 bucket with a VPC endpoint. D. An S3 bucket with a CloudFront distribution. Hosting on reserved instances is not an ideal choice. We could do it, but it is more complicated than using S3 and would not be faster. B is also wrong. Intelligent tiering is to save money on data that is conceivably not used a lot. And S3 bucket with a VPC endpoint could give us privacy when accessing the data, but here we want to publicize the video, not keep it private. D is correct. A CloudFront distribution will cache the video on edge locations all over the globe for quick access. Question 2. A company has had issues with the AWS Lambda functions failing from time to time. What service can be used to notify the engineering team when this happens? A. Use CloudFormation. B. Use CloudTrail. C. Use CloudWatch logs. D. Use CloudWatch alerts. A is not correct. CloudFormation is for creating AWS infrastructure from templates. B is also not right. CloudTrail is used to log all API calls to AWS services and can be used, for example, for auditing purposes. C is closer, but also wrong. In our CloudWatch logs, we would presumably find the error message from the failing Lambda functions, but by itself, it cannot notify. D is perfect. We can set up a CloudWatch alert to notify the engineering team when our Lambda functions are throwing errors. Okay, to summarize what we've learned today. The 5 services with cloud in the name are easy to mix up. We imagine Walter for the CloudWatch service that can monitor, log, and alert us. It is mainly used for things in our concern to make sure our workloads are performing as expected. The CloudWatch agent tool can be installed in EC2 instances to gather more information. Second, we had Terra for the CloudTrail service. CloudTrail logs all API calls made to AWS services and can be used for auditing purposes. Third, remember Firmina, who stood for CloudFormation, an infrastructure as code service that we can use to define AWS services, components, and their settings in a blueprint. This blueprint can be created however often we'd like. CloudFormation will also detect drift, meaning the actually existing setup has diverged from the one described in the blueprint. As number 4, we talked about Frida CloudFront, a content delivery network service that will cache data in many edge locations, think data centers, around the world for quick access. And finally, we touched on Cloud9, a virtual browser-based coding environment. This has been Flo from Flowprodev. If you found this video helpful, give it a like and subscribe to stay updated on new AWS features.